9 genius medieval tricks for survival that still work. A peasant family in 13th century England had no electricity, no grocery stores, no running water, and no central heating. Yet they survived winters that would kill most modern people in 48 hours. They preserved food for months without refrigeration. They purified sketchy water sources. They stayed warm in structures that cost almost nothing to build. And they did all of this with materials they could gather in an afternoon. Here's what blows my mind. We think we're more prepared than they were because we have technology. But take away the power grid for 2 weeks, and most neighborhoods would descend into chaos. Medieval people lived their entire lives in what we'd call a grid-down scenario. And they thrived. Not just survived. Thrived. The techniques they used weren't primitive or outdated. They were solutions refined over centuries of trial and error, passed down through generations, because they actually worked. And the crazy part? Most of them still work today. Better than their modern replacements in many cases. Let me show you 9 medieval survival tricks that could save your life, and why we were idiots for abandoning them. Charcoal water filtration. You're hiking. Your water bottle's empty. You find a stream, but it looks questionable. Murky. Probably contaminated with parasites, bacteria, maybe worse. What do? Medieval people faced this problem every single day. Most water sources in the Middle Ages were contaminated with waste, dead animals, industrial runoff from tanneries and dye works. Drinking unfiltered water could kill you in days, so they figured out something brilliant. Charcoal. Not the briquettes you use for your grill. Real wood charcoal, burned in low oxygen conditions until it becomes porous and absorbent. When you pass water through crushed charcoal, it physically traps particles, absorbs chemicals, and removes most organic contaminants. Medieval monasteries used charcoal filtration systems as early as the 1100s. Some of these systems are still visible in ruins across Europe. The science backs this up completely. Activated charcoal has a surface area of roughly 1,000 square meters per gram. That's insane. 1 tablespoon has more surface area than a football field. Modern water treatment facilities still use activated carbon filtration because nothing works better for removing chlorine, pesticides, and organic compounds. Here's the medieval method. You take hardwood, birch, or oak works, great, and you burn it in a covered pit with limited oxygen until it's completely charred. Then you crush it into small chunks, not powder. You layer it in a container with sand and gravel. Pour your sketchy water through the top. Collect clean water at the bottom. Does it remove everything? No. It won't filter out heavy metals or viruses, but it removes the stuff that'll give you dysentery or giardia. In a survival situation, that's the difference between making it home and dying in the woods. I tested this once with pond water that looked like swamp juice. Brown, smelled weird, definitely had things living in it. Ran it through a charcoal filter I made from a 2-liter bottle, some crushed charcoal from a campfire, and layers of sand and small rocks. The water that came out? Crystal clear. I boiled it after filtering just to be safe, but the filtration alone removed all visible particles and most of the smell. Modern preppers spend hundreds on fancy water filters. Medieval peasants made theirs from yesterday's cooking fire and some sand. Both work. One costs nothing. Tallow candles and fat lamps. Let's talk about light. You take it for granted. Flip a switch, instant brightness. Power goes out, you've got flashlights. Batteries die, you're screwed. Medieval people had no batteries, no flashlights, no LED lanterns, but they still had light all night long if they needed it. And it cost them almost nothing because they made it from something most people today throw away. Fat. Animal fat. Tallow from cows or sheep. Lard from pigs. Even fish oil if you lived near the coast. Every time they butchered an animal, they saved every scrap of fat. They'd render it down, meaning they'd heat it slowly until the fat melts and separates from tissue. Then they'd strain it. What you get is pure, storable fuel. The simplest version is a fat lamp. Take a small bowl or shell, fill it with rendered fat, add a wick made from twisted plant fibers or cloth, light it. You've got light. 1 pound of tallow can burn for 10 to 12 hours. A single cow provides 50 to 100 pounds of tallow. Do the math. That's 500 to 1,200 hours of light from one animal you were going to eat anyway. Tallow candles worked even better. You dip a wick repeatedly into molten tallow, letting each layer harden before adding the next. Or you'd pour tallow into molds. The result was cleaner burning and brighter than fat lamps. Medieval churches used thousands of tallow candles. The Bayeux Tapestry, created in the 1070s, shows people making and using tallow candles in domestic settings. Here's what modern people miss. Tallow isn't just fuel. It's also waterproof. It's edible in emergencies. It's a leather preservative. And it makes excellent soap when combined with lye. 1 ingredient, 5 uses. That's efficiency. The smell? Yeah, burning animal fat smells like burning animal fat. Not great. But beeswax candles, the fancy medieval version, smell amazing and burn even longer. A beeswax candle can burn for 24 hours straight depending on size. Monasteries kept bees specifically for wax because it was that valuable. Compare this to your modern survival kit. Flashlight batteries last what? 4 hours of continuous use? Maybe 8 if you're lucky? Then you need new batteries, which you probably don't have. A pound of saved bacon grease could light your home for a week. Root cellars for year-round food storage. Your refrigerator dies. You've got maybe 48 hours before everything spoils. Your freezer? Maybe a week if you don't open it. Then you're living on canned goods and dried pasta. Medieval people had no refrigeration at all, yet they stored fresh food for months. Root vegetables from the fall harvest stayed edible until spring. Apples lasted through winter. Cabbage, turnips, carrots, all of it preserved without any power. How? Root cellars. A root cellar is basically a hole in the ground, but the physics behind it are genius. Dig down 6 feet or more, and the temperature stabilizes at around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. That's cold enough to slow decomposition dramatically, but not cold enough to freeze. The earth itself acts as insulation, but temperature is only half the equation. Humidity matters too. Too dry, your vegetables shrivel. Too wet, they rot. Root cellars naturally maintain 80 to 95% humidity because of the surrounding soil. That's the perfect range for most storage crops. Medieval root cellars were everywhere. Archaeological digs across Europe consistently find them. Sometimes just holes with wooden covers. Sometimes elaborate stone chambers built into hillsides. Rich families had massive underground storage rooms. Peasants had smaller versions, but everyone had something. The construction was dead simple. Dig a pit below the frost line, which varies by region, but is typically 4 to 6 feet deep. Line the walls with stone or wood if you want it to last. Add ventilation, usually a pipe or chimney to let gases escape, because vegetables release ethylene as they age, which accelerates spoilage. Cover the top with soil and sod for insulation. Boom. You've got a refrigerator that never needs power and lasts centuries. There's a root cellar in Norway built in the 1300s that's still functional, still being used. That's 700 years of food storage with zero maintenance and zero energy cost. Modern root cellars work identically. People in rural areas still use them. My grandmother had one in upstate New York. She'd store 200 pounds of potatoes, bushels of apples, bins of carrots buried in sand. Everything stayed fresh until April. She'd pull out a potato in February, and it was firm and perfect. The food industry convinced us we need refrigeration. We don't. We need stable, cool temperatures and proper humidity. The earth provides both for free. Medieval people understood this. We forgot it. Pine pitch, nature's duct tape. You're in the woods, your boot tears, water's getting in. Your shelter tarp rips, rain's coming. Your canoe has a crack. You need a waterproof seal, and you need it now. Medieval people reached for pine pitch, also called pine resin or pine tar, depending on how it's processed. It's the sticky sap that oozes from damaged pine trees, and it's one of the most useful survival substances ever discovered. Pine pitch is waterproof, completely waterproof. It's also sticky enough to bond almost anything, wood to wood, leather to leather, fabric to fabric. It's flexible when warm, rock hard when cool. It's antibacterial, it's rot-resistant, and it's been used for at least 1,000 years. Archaeological evidence shows Stone Age people using pine pitch to attach arrowheads to shafts and seal water containers. By medieval times, pine pitch was industrial-scale technology. Shipbuilders used it to waterproof hulls. Sailors caulked every seam with it. Roofers sealed thatch with it. Tanners waterproofed leather with it. It was so valuable that pine forests were carefully managed to maximize resin production. Here's how you collect it. Find a pine tree, preferably one that's already damaged and oozing sap. The sap hardens into chunks on the bark. Scrape it off. If you need more, you can score the bark carefully to encourage more flow, but don't kill the tree. Raw pine pitch is too thick and sticky to work with, so you heat it gently. Not over direct flame, you'll ignite it. Use indirect heat, like placing your collection container near a fire. The pitch melts into a honey-like consistency. Add crushed charcoal to it, about 30% by volume, and it becomes easier to work with and less brittle when it hardens. You can also add animal fat or beeswax to make it more flexible. Medieval recipes varied by region and purpose, but the basic formula was always pine resin plus fillers plus heat. Once it's melted, you can use it immediately. Need to waterproof a container? Coat the inside with warm pitch. Need to repair torn fabric? Apply pitch to both sides, press together. Need to attach a knife blade to a wooden handle? Pack the junction with pitch and let it harden. The antibacterial properties are legit. Pine resin contains compounds that inhibit bacterial growth. Medieval people used it on wounds. Modern studies confirm it has antimicrobial effects against staph and other common bacteria. I've used pine pitch to repair a torn backpack strap in the field. Collected resin, melted it with a small camp stove, mixed in some charcoal dust from the fire, applied it to the tear. That repair held for 3 years of hard use, cost me $0 in about 15 minutes. Compare that to modern duct tape or zip ties. They work, sure, but they're petroleum products you have to buy and carry. Pine pitch is free and infinite if you're near pine trees, and it's actually stronger and more waterproof than most modern adhesives. Wattle and daub insulation. Your heating bill is $300 a month in winter. Your house is drafty. Heat escapes, cold seeps in. You crank the thermostat higher. The cycle continues. Medieval houses stayed warm with no central heating and construction materials that cost nothing. The secret was wattle and daub, and it's criminally underrated. Wattle and daub is a building technique that dates back at least 6,000 years. It's simple. Wattle is the frame, basically woven sticks. Daub is the coating, a mixture of clay, sand, straw, and sometimes animal dung or lime. You weave flexible branches between vertical posts to create a lattice wall. Then you plaster both sides with daub. When it dries, you've got a solid, insulated wall. The insulation value is shockingly good. A properly made wattle and daub wall has an R value comparable to modern fiberglass insulation. Medieval buildings with intact wattle and daub stay noticeably warmer in winter and cooler in summer than stone buildings of the same era. Why? Because clay and straw are terrible heat conductors. They trap air pockets, which is how all insulation works. The thickness matters too. Medieval wattle and daub walls were often 6 to 8 inches thick. Modern insulated walls are about the same. But here's the genius part. Daub is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs and releases moisture based on humidity. When indoor air gets too humid, daub absorbs it. When air gets too dry, daub releases it back. This natural humidity regulation prevents mold, reduces condensation, and makes the indoor environment more comfortable. Modern buildings completely lack this. We sealed everything with plastic and petroleum products. Now we need dehumidifiers, humidifiers, and constant ventilation to manage moisture. Medieval walls did it automatically. The materials cost nothing if you know where to look. Clay soil exists almost everywhere. Straw is agricultural waste. Small branches for wattle are abundant. You need no special tools, your hands, a knife, and some water. That's it. Construction is straightforward. You hammer vertical posts into the ground or attach them to a frame. You weave thin, flexible branches horizontally between the posts, alternating sides like basket weaving. The tighter the weave, the stronger the wall. Then you mix your daub. The traditional ratio is roughly 50% clay, 25% sand, 25% straw, plus enough water to make it workable. You plaster it on both sides of the wattle, pressing it into the gaps. Smooth the surface. Let it dry. Usually takes several days, depending on weather. Once it's fully cured, you can lime wash it for weather protection and appearance. Medieval buildings using this technique have survived 500 years with minimal maintenance. England is full of them. Half-timbered Tudor houses with wattle and daub infill, still occupied, still performing. The oldest confirmed wattle and daub structure dates to around 6000 BCE. I've seen modern homesteaders use wattle and daub for garden sheds and small structures. One guy built an entire cabin using primarily this technique. Total material cost was under $200, mostly for lumber for the frame. The walls keep the interior 15 to 20 degrees warmer than outside temperature with no heating. Compare that to modern construction. Fiberglass insulation costs $1 to $2 per square foot, requires specialized installation, needs vapor barriers, degrades over time, contains chemicals, can't regulate humidity. Wattle and daub, free materials, natural, lasts centuries, breathes, self-regulating, fermentation for food preservation. Your vegetables are about to go bad? You've got pounds of cabbage, cucumbers, carrots. No way to eat it all before it spoils. What do? Medieval people fermented it, and in doing so, they turned perishable food into food that lasted months or years, while simultaneously making it more nutritious and easier to digest. Fermentation is controlled rot. That sounds disgusting. But bear with me. You're using beneficial bacteria, primarily lactobacillus, to convert sugars in food into lactic acid. This acid lowers the pH so much that harmful bacteria can't survive. The result is food that's preserved, probiotic-rich, and often tastier than the original. Sauerkraut is the classic example. Take cabbage, shred it, add salt. That's it. The salt draws out moisture and creates a brine. Naturally occurring lactobacillus on the cabbage surface starts multiplying. Within days, you've got fermentation. Within weeks, you've got sauerkraut that'll keep for months in a cool location. Medieval Europeans fermented everything: cabbage, turnips, beets, cucumbers, fish, meat, milk. Korean kimchi dates back to at least the 1st century BCE. Japanese pickles, Eastern European pickled vegetables, Middle Eastern fermented dairy, all of it stems from the same principle discovered independently across cultures. Why did this work so well? Because fermentation doesn't just preserve food, it improves it. Fermented vegetables have higher vitamin C content than fresh vegetables. The fermentation process breaks down difficult-to-digest compounds and creates beneficial enzymes. Lactobacillus produces B vitamins during fermentation. Medieval sailors figured this out through trial and error. Captain James Cook, though not medieval, famously brought 7,860 pounds of sauerkraut on his voyages in the 1770s. Not a single crew member died of scurvy. Fermented cabbage prevented it. The process is ridiculously simple. For basic lacto-fermentation, you need vegetables, salt, and a container. That's it. No special equipment, no heat, no pressure canning, just time. Here's the medieval method for sauerkraut. Shred 1 large head of cabbage. Sprinkle with 1 to 2 tablespoons of salt per pound of cabbage. Massage it aggressively for 5 minutes until it releases juice. Pack it tightly into a crock or jar, pressing down until the brine covers the cabbage. Weigh it down so nothing floats. Cover loosely to let gases escape. Wait. In 3 days, you'll see bubbles. That's fermentation. After a week, taste it. Keep going until it reaches the sourness you like. Could be 2 weeks, could be 6 weeks depending on temperature. Then seal it and store it somewhere cool. This sauerkraut will keep for 6 months or longer. 1 head of cabbage becomes half a year of shelf-stable food. The salt preserves it initially, the acid preserves it long-term, and the beneficial bacteria crowd out anything harmful. Medieval people didn't understand the microbiology. They just knew it worked. Modern science confirms why. Fermented foods contain billions of probiotic bacteria per serving. These bacteria support digestive health, immune function, and even mental health through the gut-brain axis. You can ferment almost anything. Carrots, beets, radishes, green beans, peppers. The process is identical. Some vegetables need a starter brine if they don't have enough natural sugars, but cabbage and cucumbers ferment easily on their own. The other genius aspect? Fermentation works without refrigeration. Room temperature is ideal for fermentation. Once it's done, cool storage slows it down but isn't required. Medieval people kept fermented foods in root cellars or cool pantries for months. I've been fermenting vegetables for years. I've got jars of sauerkraut, pickles, and kimchi that are 6 months old, sitting in my basement, perfectly edible and delicious. My refrigerator is full of fresh vegetables that go bad in a week. Makes you think. Ash lye for cleaning and soap. You run out of soap. Your clothes are dirty. Your dishes are greasy. Modern you drives to the store and buys detergent. Medieval you walk to your fireplace and solve the problem with ashes. Wood ash contains potassium carbonate. When you mix ash with water, it creates lye, a powerful alkaline solution. Lye dissolves grease, breaks down organic matter, and kills bacteria. It's the active ingredient in modern drain cleaners and industrial degreasers. Medieval people used ash lye for everything: laundry, dishes, floors, even personal hygiene. And it worked shockingly well. Completely free, infinitely renewable, and effective enough that people used it exclusively for over 1,000 years. Here's how it works. You take hardwood ash, oak, and beech work best from a completely burned fire. No charcoal chunks, just fine gray ash. You put it in a container with holes in the bottom. You pour water through it slowly. The water leaches out the potassium carbonate. What drips out is lye water, also called caustic potash. The strength varies depending on your ash-to-water ratio. Weak lye is good for general cleaning. Strong lye, where you use less water or run the same water through fresh ash multiple times, is powerful enough to strip paint and dissolve hair. For laundry, medieval people would soak clothes in warm lye water. The alkalinity breaks down body oils and dirt. They'd rinse thoroughly and hang to dry. Worked perfectly for linen and wool. Better than many modern detergents, actually, because lye doesn't leave residue. But the real magic happens when you combine lye with fat. You get soap. Actual soap. The chemical reaction is called saponification. The lye breaks down fat molecules and reforms them into soap molecules, which have a water-loving end and a grease-loving end. This lets soap grab onto dirt and wash it away with water. Medieval soap making was a specialized craft. You'd take ash lye and render animal fat, typically tallow. You'd heat them together, stirring constantly. The mixture would thicken and react. After hours of heating and stirring, you'd have crude soap. Let it cool and harden, cut it into bars. This soap was harsh by modern standards. It stripped oils from your skin, but it cleaned like nothing else. Medieval laundresses used it for everything. Castile soap, named for the Castile region of Spain, is still made essentially the same way, though modern versions use sodium hydroxide instead of ash lye. The method is still practical today. I've made soap from wood ash and bacon grease. Took about 4 hours start to finish. The result was a beige bar of soap that cleaned dishes better than commercial dish soap. Harsh on hands, yes, but absolutely effective. For gentler cleaning, you don't need full soap. Just ash lye water works. Pour it over greasy pans. Let it sit. The grease dissolves. Use it to clean floors. Rinse well afterward because lye is caustic. Safety note: lye is seriously alkaline. It can burn skin and damage eyes. Medieval people knew this. They were careful. Wear gloves. Don't splash it. Rinse thoroughly after use. But consider the logistics. Every fire you burn produces ash. That ash is free cleaning power. You're probably throwing it away. Medieval people would think you were insane. Straw bale construction. Your heating bill is insane. Your walls are thin. Heat pours out. You keep turning up the heat. The cycle continues. Medieval people, especially in colder regions, used straw for insulation, not just as part of wattle and daub, but as bulk insulation packed into walls, attics, and floors. And later, when people figured out how to bind straw into dense bales, straw bale construction became one of the most efficient building methods ever developed. Straw is agricultural waste. Farming produces millions of tons of it annually. Most gets burned or plowed under, but straw is an incredible insulator. A bale of straw, densely packed, has an R value of about R2 to R2.5 per inch of thickness. A standard 18-inch straw bale wall has an R value between 40 and 50. That's double what modern code requires, triple what most existing houses have. And it costs pennies per bale. Medieval barns and stables often had loose straw packed between wall studs or piled against walls for winter insulation. The earliest confirmed straw bale buildings date to the 1890s in Nebraska, but the principle, using densely packed straw as insulation, is far older. Straw bale walls are fireproof when properly constructed. Sounds wrong, I know. Straw burns easily when loose, but compressed into dense bales and covered with plaster or stucco, there's no oxygen for combustion. Fire tests show plastered straw bale walls resist fire for 2 hours or more, better than wood framing. They're also soundproof. The density absorbs sound waves. Straw bale houses are shockingly quiet inside, and they breathe. Like wattle and daub, straw naturally regulates humidity. Excess moisture passes through gradually without causing rot. This prevents mold and creates a healthier indoor environment. Construction is different from modern methods but not complicated. You stack bales like giant bricks, staggering joints for strength. You pin them together with rebar or bamboo stakes, you add a roof structure, then you plaster both sides with clay plaster, lime plaster, or stucco. The plaster seals the walls and protects the straw from moisture and pests. The result is a wall that's thick, super insulated, fire-resistant, soundproof, and made from renewable waste material. Cost? A straw bale costs $3 to $6. You need about 300 bales for a small house. That's $1,800 in insulation for an entire house. Compare that to fiberglass, spray foam, or rigid foam insulation, thousands more. The oldest surviving straw bale buildings are over 100 years old and still structurally sound. Straw doesn't decompose when kept dry. The plaster keeps it dry. Simple. Modern building codes in many states now recognize straw bale construction. It's legal. It's tested. It works. But the building industry pushed synthetic insulation because it's proprietary and profitable. Straw is cheap and abundant. Medieval people used what was cheap and abundant. We built an entire industry around what's expensive and patented. Char cloth fire starting. You need fire. It's cold. You're wet. Your lighter won't work. Matches are soaked. You're in trouble. Medieval people would pull out their char cloth and have a fire going in minutes using nothing but a striking stone and some dried grass. Char cloth is fabric, usually linen or cotton, that's been charred in a low-oxygen environment. The process converts it into pure carbon. It catches sparks incredibly easily and smolders slowly, giving you time to build your fire. The technique dates back to at least the Iron Age. By medieval times, char cloth was standard fire-starting equipment. Everyone who traveled carried it. Flint and steel fire starting, which was the primary method before matches, depended on char cloth. Here's why it works. When you strike steel against flint, tiny particles of steel shave off and ignite from friction. These sparks are extremely hot, around 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, but they're tiny and they burn for a fraction of a second. Regular tinder won't catch. The spark dies before it can ignite anything. But char cloth catches instantly. The carbon structure has such a low ignition point that even a tiny spark causes it to glow. Then it smolders. This gives you a coal, and coals can ignite larger tinder. The process of making char cloth is simple. You take cotton or linen fabric, cut it into small squares, and put them in a metal container with a small hole in the lid. You heat the container over fire. The fabric inside chars without burning because there's no oxygen. Smoke comes out the hole. When the smoke stops, it's done. Let it cool, open the container, you've got char cloth. I've made char cloth from old t-shirts in a metal tin. Took 10 minutes over a campfire. The result caught sparks on the first strike every single time. Medieval people carried char cloth in waterproof containers, often small leather pouches. They'd carry flint and a steel striker. To start a fire, you'd hold the char cloth close to the flint, strike the steel against the flint, catch a spark on the char cloth. The cloth would start glowing. You'd transfer it to a bundle of fine tinder, dry grass, or shredded bark, and blow gently. The glow spreads, the tinder ignites, you add kindling, then logs. Fire. The whole process takes 2 to 5 minutes with practice. It works in rain because you can keep your char cloth and steel dry. It works in wind because the ember in the cloth is protected once transferred to tinder. It works when you're wet because you only need dry tinder, not dry clothes. Matches were invented in the 1820s. Lighters came much later. For thousands of years before that, fire starting meant flint, steel, and char cloth. It was so reliable that armies, explorers, and households depended on it completely. Modern people carry butane lighters and call it survival gear. Your lighter stops working at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Gets wet, done. Runs out of fuel, paperweight. Char cloth works forever. One square catches dozens of fires. You can make more from any fabric and any fire. The redundancy is beautiful. Even if your char cloth gets wet, you can dry it. Can't dry a dead lighter. Even if you lose your steel striker, any piece of high-carbon steel works. A knife blade, a file, even a rock if it's the right type. This technique kept people alive through winters, wars, and wilderness expeditions for millennia. Then we invented disposable plastic lighters and forgot how to do it. Medieval people would be baffled. Conclusion: 9 techniques, 9 solutions to problems we think require modern technology. Water filtration from charcoal, light from animal fat, food storage in the ground, waterproof sealant from trees, insulated walls from mud and sticks, preserved food from salt and thyme, cleaning supplies from ashes, building insulation from farm waste, reliable fire from charred cloth. Every single one of these methods is cheaper, more sustainable, and more reliable than what replaced it. And every single one still works today exactly as it did 800 years ago. The pattern is obvious once you see it. Medieval people solved survival challenges using local materials and physics-based solutions. No supply chains. No electricity, no patents. Just understanding how materials behave and using them intelligently. We didn't advance past these methods. We just traded them for methods that require infrastructure, money, and specialized products. When that infrastructure fails, and it will eventually, these medieval techniques will be the only things that work. The real genius wasn't the individual techniques, it was the mindset. Medieval people assumed they'd have to solve problems with whatever was around them. They couldn't order supplies online or drive to the hardware store, so they observed, experimented, and remembered what worked. Then, they taught their children. We lost that. We outsourced survival to corporations and systems, and we're weaker for it. But these techniques are still here. They're still testable. They're still functional. You can make char cloth this weekend. You can collect pine pitch on your next hike. You can ferment cabbage in your kitchen right now. All of it works. The question is whether you'll try it before you need it, or wait until modern solutions fail and you're scrambling to remember what people knew 700 years ago. If you found these forgotten techniques valuable, hit the like button and subscribe to Medieval Over Modern for more discoveries about what we lost when we stopped looking backward. Drop a comment and let me know which survival trick surprised you most, or if you've already been using any of these methods yourself. Share this with anyone interested in self-reliance, survival skills, or just understanding why the old ways sometimes worked better than what we replaced them with.